I want to bring in three people who know a lot about these kinds of searches and the legal maneuvering around them and the significance of the level of documents we may be talking about tonight. Chris Swecker is the former assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigations Unit. Dan Eckart is an attorney and a former federal prosecutor and federal agent. And Phil Bump is a national correspondent for the Washington Post. So first, Phil, I want to start with you because your paper is reporting tonight, and in fact just broke in the last hour or so, that some of the classified information that was retrieved from this search and seizure on Monday pertained to nuclear documents. Can you elucidate?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not much beyond what's in that initial report. The report states that they do relate to nuclear material sort of broadly. It's sort of vague, and that can obviously mean a lot of different things. It can mean the United States' material. It can mean other countries. It can mean weapons. It can mean other things. It's not clear based on the report what exactly that is. You're absolutely right, as you mentioned before. That is the sort of thing that would be classified at an extremely high level in nearly every case relating to nuclear material. But I mean, that to the point, the question is, these dozens of documents that were seized, how many of them fall into this category? And I think it sort of reshapes the discussion around this search on Monday, which has been, Donald Trump and his allies have been very, very pointed in trying to blow off as relating to things that aren't particularly significant.
So, Chris Swecker, I want you to come in on what Brian Entin has broken tonight from his FBI source, and his source is very close to this. I remind our viewers that Brian Entin broke the news of the safe on Monday night before any network had that. He broke the news of how long the search was, when it started, when it ended, where the safe was, which rooms were actually searched above the ballroom, Donald Trump's residence and office. So I think he's got a pretty good source on this. And for the source, and I'll repeat, to say that there were dozens of classified documents that were retrieved in Monday's search, and many of them were of the TSSCI level, which is top secret. That's sensitive, compartmentalized information. Chris, I know you know exactly what that means, so maybe fill us in on what I'm not saying.
Yeah, SCI, sensitive compartmentalized information, is one of the highest classification levels. It's very restricted access. There are very specific requirements on how you store that information, how you move it around, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, the devil's in the details here. I have to point out that this is exactly what we were looking at with Hillary Clinton and her emails. There's been other cases like this, and not a lot of prosecutions over the years, but it is something that could be very significant if there is information in there that if it fell into the wrong hands, would be detrimental to our national security. I would submit to you that there's a lot of overclassification that takes place, but that doesn't mitigate the circumstances here whatsoever. If those documents were there, they didn't belong there, should have been handed back over to the government.
Well, let me ask you about overclassification. Is it frequent? I get it. Classified's willy-nilly, right? Stamp, stamp, stamp. But you just told me that the subset, which is TSSCI, that's extraordinary. So is that also overclassified too often, or is that pretty selective?
Not as much, because that's classified that way because of where the information came from generally. And excuse me, that type of information, there's a lot more discipline around it. I've just found that there's a lot of careless classification, I should say, at the classified level. That there's a tendency to just classify huge swaths of information rather than go through it detail by detail.
Which is also a very interesting part of all of this. So, Dan Eckart, as an attorney, as a former federal prosecutor and a federal agent, I want you to weigh in on the notion that there was a lot of back and forth, and Chris Swecker just mentioned the Hillary Clinton issue. There was a lot of back and forth there as well. And we're talking about, 2 subpoenas plus a visit, plus what looked like, we're complying with the subpoena, we're returning the boxes, only to find out there were 13 more, only to find out that in the 13 more, there are all these, dozens of classified documents and top secret documents among them. Does that change the nature of this, say, from the Hillary Clinton investigation? Because that's how both sides are weighing in on this, right? If you're on the right, you're saying, what about the Hillary Clinton? Why is he being treated differently? If you're on the left, you're saying, this is so much bigger, and there was a battle going on, and who knows why those things were being kept next to a pool, a room off the hallway to the pool.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what is going to come out is that there's probably a sense of urgency with this investigation, and I do know that there was some subpoenas that were sent. Now we don't know what the response was, but that timeline you just showed us was pretty telling. I mean, if that government official from DOJ went down there and actually saw that the documents were in an unsecure location, or they have an informant that says they're in an unsecure location. I mean, this is something that's being prosecuted right now in the Middle District of Florida. There's a case right now, Jeremy Brown. He's a former Green Beret, and he was indicted just a couple of months ago for having he had top secret information from 2004 in his house. They did a search warrant on his house. And so this is like current things are going on right now doing this. So this is not something that it's exceptional to the president of the United States, but it does have some validity, particularly when it's that level. It's NDI information. It's a federal statute, 18 U.S.C. 793E. It's up to 10 years. So it's a serious matter. And whenever you're talking about compartmentalized information, back in the day, a long time ago during the Cold War, back in the 80s, I mean, this was the stuff that I didn't have access to, but some of my colleagues had access to. Probably Chris had it, but involves nuclear. Involves very sensitive information that if it gets in the wrong hands, it could impact national security.
And oftentimes can impact the lives of some of the agents who work on these, particular cases, because many are deep undercover. And if they are listed in these documents and they get into the wrong hands, those covers are blown, and that can, be completely lethal. Boy, do I have a lot more questions. Let's go ahead, Dan.
Just one thing I want to add, in the way the statute's written, I mean, you could have that clearance just like President Trump had that clearance, and at the time have those documents in your possession. But if you maintain them, if you keep them, you're supposed to provide them back to the government. If you don't do that, that's a violation of the statute. So that's
right.
Me,
and it's a law that the president actually, that Donald Trump actually signed to make a felony and add, a couple of years, like 5 years, to the jail time. Okay, among the questions I have after the break, I have to get you guys all to stay, because this breaking news has sort of pushed the show a little longer than we expected. But the three questions I have is about the cooperating witness. A lot of people are saying it's a mole, it's a rat, it's a snitch, and all the rest. But we all know how this business works, right? Sometimes you're put in a position, a rock and a hard place. Sometimes the government has you, and you don't have a choice, and you have to divulge what you know. That I want to ask you guys about that. I also want to ask about some of the tweets that have been out saying, if you don't release it, to the DOJ, you're cheating. There's something untowards. And well, now the DOJ wants it released. And then I also want to ask about presidents and their ability to declassify, not only when they're in office, but after they're in office, because a lot of people say that that's what Donald Trump was doing with those documents. He was in the process of declassifying it. So let's find out if that's actually possible. We're back after this. I want to just bring you up to speed on our breaking news. If you are just joining us, some really jaw-dropping details found out by our Brian Enton, our national correspondent here at NewsNation, who has just a phenomenal source, who has disclosed to NewsNation that the raid on Monday night, the search and seizure operation, has yielded dozens of classified documents, many of them top secret in nature, many of them described as TSSCI, which is top secret sensitive compartmented information. That is about the highest level of classification that you can get. That's significant because the Washington Post is also reporting tonight that some of those documents, those classified documents that were obtained in this search and seizure operation, pertained to nuclear issues, that some of them were nuclear related documents. Still with me, Chris Swecker is the former assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigations Unit. Dan Eckart is an attorney and former federal prosecutor and federal agent. And Phil Bump is a national correspondent for the Washington Post. So I asked a couple of those questions, and I'm going to ask them to you tonight about the notion that declassifying is something that the president's, that's part of their purview. So, Chris, do you know if the president is, if former President Donald Trump is allowed to declassify once he's out of office, and if there could be some legitimacy to having those documents there, even after subpoenas, even after visits, even after, lots and lots of conversations?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that the president, a sitting president, has the authority to declassify. There's some court cases on it, not a lot, but there's some sort of strain of thought that by just simply possessing or uttering or revealing the information, that very act is the act of declassification. I'm not sure how that holds up under these facts and circumstances. But I guess, put my attorney hat on. I would say that you would have to make it known before you left office that these documents were declassified. I don't think you could do it retroactively, just by the act of possessing them and putting them somewhere in your, domain, if you will.
Chris, I know that you've been outspoken. About, look, you shouldn't just always assume that everything is pristine. There have been questions about the FBI, and there have been some pretty, strident statements made by Trump supporters, a Trump lawyer, even Trump himself on Truth Social, saying, well, I worry that, there could be something planted with zero evidence to back that up. And that really casts a massive aspersion on the FBI. That's your former agency. Even the AG was pretty upset about that in his statement today. It's a little hard to plant, though, dozens of classified documents and top secret documents, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I mean, that doesn't. I don't even think that needs to be countered. That's not something that the FBI agents on the scene would do. I would guess that there was a more than guess that they had their own videographer going through the searches themselves, a search of this nature, they documented very well. And they took photos of things before they touched them, for example. That's fairly standard, but I think they would this is an evidence response team, an ERT. They know how to handle evidence. They know how to package evidence. They know how to document the picking, the retrieval of evidence and that sort of thing. So I would dismiss that out of hand. Now, I have other issues about how this was done. I have issues about the fact that it was done at all, but I would never say that FBI agents on the scene there would plant documents. No way.
Okay. So I want to get you in here if I can, Phil, and it's on the politics of this because, it's politics no matter what. I stick with the facts and the law, but everybody else goes bananas. So Ted Cruz tweeted 2 days ago, to the AG and the FBI director, release the warrant now. The American people deserve to see it. And that's Ted Cruz. So now it's in the hands of Donald Trump. What are your expectations by 3 o'clock tomorrow when Donald Trump has, that deadline to agree or disagree to allow the federal judge to unseal that warrant?
Well, I think Garland really called Trump's bluff to a large extent. Trump's lawyers had sort of said, they told someone from NBC News, for example, that they're going to sort of leave the ball in the Justice Department's court. I don't think I think it's pretty safe to assume that the warrant is not going to reflect positively on the former president. We're going to have a broader sense of what the FBI was looking for to some extent. And so I think the Trump team was happy to have that still sort of shielded in obscurity. I would not be surprised, however, if they tried to come out tomorrow morning and present the warrant that they were given, for example, and to try and frame it. That's a pattern we've seen in the past. But yeah, I mean, look, it was pretty obvious even from the jump on Monday that siding very fervently with Donald Trump on this, as opposed to the men and women of the FBI and the Justice Department, was a risky political bet. I understand what the political rewards were for it, but I think today really showed why that bet posed a risk.
So Dan Eckart, the person, we talked about the potential cooperating witness here, the insider, the one who knew what Brian Entin reported from his FBI source, that there was a storage room off an interior hallway near the pool, not a basement, a small room about 10 by 6 lined with boxes, and the secondary area that they discovered documents in, which was apparently in that office above the ballroom, the same room with the safe. Used to be a bridal suite. Now it's Trump's office, and that's where the other documents were found. The cooperating witness, do you suspect this is somebody who's had enough and is turning on Donald Trump, or do you suspect this is the FBI squeezing concentric circles and putting them in a position where there's really no escape?
Well, cooperators come from all walks of life. I mean, you can have people that are unhappy with the person that's under investigation. You can have, you name it. I mean, there's just the universe of people that cooperate, and that's how the feds make their cases. I mean, when I was the prosecutor, I mean, I can't tell you what percentage of my cases involve confidential informants, and I see that now on this side. So one thing, that it might be more than one person too. I mean, you might have one person that says, this is where President Trump keeps his documents, and then another person could give the details of what the nature of those documents are. But one thing I have to get out is that it's interesting where there's a lot of this talk about what's going to happen tomorrow, but I think what's getting lost in the shuffle is that DOJ confirmed today that President Trump's representatives have a copy of the warrant and the inventory. I mean, that's standard procedure. They've had it.
It's
and
standard.
I've said,
Yeah.
Now with this revelation that you made tonight, maybe that's why he hasn't released it yet, because he's got it, or his people have it, so he could show it to everybody and explain what violated and what.
There was some debate today, different networks reporting he is absolutely going to fight this all the way up several levels, maybe even to the Supreme Court. And then others saying that his lawyers have said they're not going to fight it. So I can't wait for tomorrow. I say that every day, but boy, can I tonight. Chris Swecker, Dan Eckart, and Phil Bum, thank you all for helping us sort of ride through this seismic news. I really appreciate it. Just again, to reiterate, if you're just joining us, our Brian Enton with a source in the FBI, an impeccable source who has been correct from Monday night on, says that dozens of classified documents were obtained during that search and seizure operation on Monday. Many of those classified documents were actually of the top secret nature, top secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information, compartmented information, and that's as high as it gets. So watch this space. Thank you to all three of you, and I hope you'll all come back. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.